All right, I'm here with BFG Neil from Discord. He's one of the OGs of the Helium kind of internal help community. He's been one of the most helpful moderators and certainly been super helpful for me. And we're going to go through in the long run, the tool that he's built to help you with Helium. But first off, Neil, welcome, dude. I'm psyched to have you on.
Thanks for having me, man.
Heck yeah. Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. Walk me through how you found Helium and kind of your journey to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I started my business a few years back, and I was in the web hosting industry, and I was looking at mining cryptocurrency, and I was doing a little tiny bit of day trading, and decided to build up a GPU rig, and making a little bit of money on it every day, and luckily a big brave browser ad for Helium came on the screen, so I ordered and got in there, and it just sounded really promising, because with GPU mining, each of those graphics cards is running at 120 watts, so all the hotspots I own now use less than one graphics card or two graphics cards, so it's just such a waste. The idea was to have a node in everybody's house with Bitcoin and things like that. So I'm a big believer of that strategy and having these nodes spread around, for decentralization. It's great. So it just really struck me as a project. So I've always been one to tinker with boards and things as well. So I've enjoyed the sensors just as much as putting the hotspots in. So it's been real fun. And yeah, I've done very well from it.
Yeah, no, it's been an amazing ride. So when did you get your first miner?
2019 in August. It was the first, they were OG units. I had one. I remember getting it and thinking, oh, maybe I'll hit 50 miles, just plonking it on the side, and and then going down the rabbit hole and learning about antennas and installations and blocking signal through buildings and line of sight and everything. So yeah, I got in with one at the start, and then I bought two more, and yeah, just grew from there. So it was a crazy time. It was about 8,000 miners I got in at. So
this must have been 2020, right? August 2020, not 2019.
Yeah, 2020 probably is. Yeah, it feels like longer now.
Yeah.
Sometimes in Helium things feel like ages ago, and they're a month ago. So it's probably it's a year. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think at the time, the big kind of question was, where are all the miners? Like there's the whole when boat thing, because some boat had got stuck in the Panama Canal and no one had their miners. So there's been a history throughout Helium of just having a hard time getting these things in our hands.
Yeah, I remember when I first got mine, it took about 6 months from when I ordered to get it. And I tell people that all the time. I've never not really waited for a miner. It's always been a frustratingly long wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you also, did you get an alpha code? Or you in on the DIY program?
Yeah, I got an alpha code. So I've got one DIY miner. They're still live on the network now, still performing well. Yeah.
No, they're a great deal. And that's almost exactly when I came in, just serendipitously. I think I got into Discord, and a week later, there's like, hey, there's this alpha code program. I was like, all right, I'll try that out. Not realizing what an amazingly good deal that was. Okay, so then you got on the Discord about the same time as maybe a month earlier, kind of August 2020, right? And how quickly do you think you started helping people with hotspots? Was it right away? Because you brought kind of a tech background into this, right?
Yeah, a lot of people get confused about the networking and things. And, one of the first things I spotted was the relay issue. Coming from a network background, I could see that something was going on, but it was this mystery of almost a black box in the corner of the room. You can't really control it. So with the alpha, it allowed me to look at the software and then notice things that you could do with it, to actually check your miners and see that there's problems. And I think I was one of the first to say relay is a real issue. You will not get beaconed as much if you're relayed. So you really want to clear up relay to fix that. So that's when they brought in what I had, a relay checker, and Helium brought it into Explorer to show you that you're relayed for that reason.
Yeah, let's talk through what relay is, because a lot of people say it, but not many people understand it. So walk me through that.
So relayed is where your hotspot doesn't have a direct connection to it inbound. So normally a network device, if it wants to go fetch information, that outbound procedure is always open. It can always go fetch something, but if something wants to talk to it, it needs a port open. And if you don't have that port open, basically you go for another hotspot. That hotspot gets the message. Your hotspot checks into that hotspot, so that an outbound connection and grabs that message and then performs it. So if you're relayed and that relay link goes down, it means that you might miss out on activity.
Got it. Let me make sure I'm understanding that. So if a relayed hotspot can always connect to the network through its internet connection, but a relayed hotspot doesn't hear the network through its internet connection, it hears it from other hotspots, or am I getting that backward?
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, so everything it does is outbound when it's relayed. It goes and fetches it from the relay rather than the relay telling it it's always outbound, because that's generally open on most networks.
Okay. And the problem there with the beaconing, like the result of having a relayed hotspot, is that your hotspot won't hear as many beacons, or it won't witness as many. Yeah, won't witness or won't transmit.
Witnessing isn't affected, because as long as the challenger isn't relayed, it can always submit witness reports, because that's an outbound action. But if someone were to challenge it, its relay would often go down, or there's gossip issues and things, and it just has problems, so it will just miss it completely. There's only a certain amount of retry to it as well. So
right, because there's a whole cycle. So there's the challenger, and then the beaconer, and the witness. The challenger constructs a challenge, assigns it to a beaconer. The beaconer beacons it out. The witness hears it, and then all the witnesses send their receipts back to the original challengers. That's kind of how the cycle goes.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so relay can affect you if you're challenging hotspots, because you just won't hear those witness receipts. They can't talk to you to tell you that. So you often see a zero witness beacon happen when you relayed. It's quite common. It's also possible to not get zero witness beacons as well. Relay links can work. It's just that they're so flaky, it's very few and far between. And it's just not a reliable connection to the network. Just causes too many issues, really.
Yeah. Okay. So you see this relay issue, you write, or you figure out how to, you see it more clearly because you have the alpha code, which allows you to build a DIY miner, which allows you to not only kind of see what's happening inside the miner, but also separate out like the two general pieces, one of which is the radio, so the packet forwarder, and the other is the miner piece. So you can really get into the weeds there. So it was a great kind of service that Helium did, allowing folks more like you than me to kind of figure it out, because you actually knew what you're looking at. And then they shut that down because it was super susceptible to gaming, if I remember that right. But so you wrote something, or you sent something to Helium saying, hey, here's one way at least to check this?
Yeah, it was more that I was pointing it out as an issue. A lot of folks are wondering why they weren't beaconing. And it's because I did the research, and often because the network was so fast with so small a number of miners, often when I fixed relay, I would beacon instantly because that connection could finally be made. So as soon as I noticed that, I fixed relay on every hotspot I had, and it just improved the earnings massively. And it was seen as an important enough thing that I wrote a tool so people could check it, and they liked it, so they made it core and explorer.
Yep. And so then many people may curse you for that, although they're kind of attacking the messenger. So that's when really we saw across the network, and this must have been, was it early spring 2021 when people started seeing relayed in the Explorer? Sure.
Yeah, it was fairly after about that time. Yeah, it was. Took a while to realize, and relay issues have been coming worse since then. So it's really important to fix. So I'm so glad they got that out early, that many are thinking about fixing the relay straight away, because it makes such a massive difference to the network.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So it's not just a massive difference to your hotspot's earnings. It's also a difference to the network, and it's much more important for the health of the network than it is for your specific hotspot's earnings.
Yeah, the strength of the network is at the time it was even worse, because if you were relayed, then there was consensus issues. So getting it solved back then was such a massive issue, and it is still to this day. I think back in the day the stat was something like 60% of the network was relayed, and it probably is a bit higher than that now. I think a lot fix it, but you affect other people's earnings, by being relayed, and you also affect other hotspots in the sense that relay is delivering messages to you, so it's doing double its job of what it needs to do to deliver messages, which can often mean very large bandwidth usage at the moment. I've noticed that if you've got a relayed hotspot, they use about 60-70 gig, but if you're not relayed, then it's over 100. Yeah.
Okay, so really the relayed hotspots are kind of selfishly benefiting, and it's costing the unrelayed hotspots.
Exactly. And then they're issuing challenges that can never have receipts sometimes. So, you know, they're just soaking in the witnessing, but not doing any of the challenging correctly, which is affecting everyone. So really important that you fix relay. And it's one of those situations that like gateways will fix this, because they don't use lib peer-to-peer. So there's no talking to each hotspot. They just check in with validators, which again is outbound. So a validator will say, right, this hotspot needs to beacon. And then the hotspot will do a heartbeat check-in and say, do I need to do anything? Okay, do it. You know, and validators have their ports open, so witness receipts can always be accepted against them.
Right.
So it just solves the network so much that it's not worth changing the system now when such a big fix is coming.
Cool. Yeah, let's talk through that, because there's a bunch of terms that I halfway get, but I'm guessing a lot of people listening is like, what is going on? So we got, I think Helium calls them light hotspots. I don't think they call them light gateways. They've corrected me on that. That's their term, whatever. So this whole idea of light hotspots is coming, those are supposed to be out by Q1 2022. So end of March 2022 is like the latest they should be out by. We're recording this mid-November 2021. So we've got kind of up to, what is it, 4.5 months before it gets fixed at the outside?
Yeah. I mean, they put out some really good updates the other day that reduced the gossiping amount and the amount of traffic on the network. So it's become a lot better, but it's going to be struggles until the light gateways come, really. And we do away with this whole syncing thing.
Okay, so basically anyone seeing this between mid-November when we've recorded it and the end of March, or up until light hotspots are launched. Gosh, I get so excited. You should expect that there are going to be problems on the network, because the network has grown, I think, kind of much faster than Helium Inc. was ready for it to grow. And also, we just didn't see some of these problems coming. Like it just got so big so fast. So if you see a problem with your hotspot, I'll make this statement and then correct me if I'm wrong. If you see a problem with your hotspot, it is very unlikely to be the hardware on your hotspot. It's very unlikely to be a button you can press that will fix it.
No.
Okay.
No, that's one of the worst things you can do right now, is turn your hotspot off. You know, if you disconnect them, often many hosts don't set port forwarding, for example. They'll let the automated systems open the port for them. And if you reboot your hotspot, it can drop that connection, and then your router needs a reboot as well. And, you know, you can spend a day troubleshooting that again. So it's important that you just work through it, test your setup, basically.
So let's see. You're English, so you guys say router, Americans say router, just for the American audience. Like that's what he's talking about. And then the other thing is, let's see. There's a bunch of stuff in there. Let's talk at a kind of really high level, how you would fix the relay on your hotspot. So without going into details, if I was going to tell someone like my grandmother, well, not a grandmother because mine are dead, but anyone who's not internet savvy, is basically the steps are you Google port forwarding, comma, then the model name of your router. God, you got me saying it.
I've got you saying it now.
Yeah, and then you go into that port forwarding and you set a port forward for 44158, and you connect it to basically the address of your device, which can be called the MAC address, or it's also could be an internal IP. Am I getting that kind of mostly right, or is there corrections you'd make?
No, that's dead right. I mean, there's often some confusions to it, because a lot of people, they'll have an ISP router, so one for their internet provider, but then they'll install one in the house as well. So they have double the router, so it can cause some problems. So the most important thing I could say to anyone is connect your Helium miners directly to your internet router. Don't use a second one, because otherwise you have to create a whole route between the whole system and it gets confusing. So ideally, always plug into that ISP router first. But yeah, that's basically the steps. You need to go onto that router and open port 44158 to your hotspot. You normally get the choice between the IP or MAC address of the hotspot. So you can normally go to like connected devices, and it will list your hotspot there and say what it's connected with. So you can forward to that IP address. But the second part is that you need to make sure you set a local static IP address. So that's the IP address that your router assigns to your hotspot, not your public one. So if your device restarts on your local network, it will often change the IP every time it reboots. So if you don't set that static IP, it's just as bad as not opening that port, because one reboot from an update or one disconnect can cause it to break.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the difference, or let's just make sure the difference is clear between a public static IP or a public IP and a like an internal IP.
Yeah.
Is that what it'd be called? Okay.
Public IP addresses is where your network provider will assign you an IP address. They'll say to the world, if you want to reach this host, you can reach them by this IP address. The same thing happens on your local network, and that's what we call the local IP. Your router that controls the network will assign every device an IP address. So you have a public one from your ISP and a local one from your local router.
Perfect. Okay, so it's kind of like, if we think of it, it's like your street address is kind of like your public IP. So someone can come to whatever 1313 Mockingbird Lane, that gets them to your house, and then the local IPs are like the name of the rooms in your house. It's like,
yes,
oh, you want to go to the dining room, or you want to go to the kitchen.
Exactly that, yeah.
And those are typically like what 192.168.blah, right?
Yeah, generally 192.168.0.1 or 1.1, or if you're on very fancy network equipment, sometimes it's 10.0.0.1.
Okay, and then if you really want to, I think you're still doing this. You can certainly reach out to me or Neil, and Neil can walk you through this. I don't think you need to, but some people just want to be handheld through it. If you can use Google, and you can Google port forwarding and the model of your router, you can figure this out. But if you don't have time, yeah, connect with Neil. Okay, so that is kind of big picture how that works, which is super helpful. Thank you for going through that. The next thing that I think you did that was awesome was you built a tool that helped people see, and I think this is probably, despite being an investor in Helium.Vision and helping Hotspot, and think those are both awesome, is the single most useful tool right now is this thing that you've built. So can you walk me through the name of it, where you can find it, and what it does, and why it's so damn useful?
Yeah, so the website's heliumstatus.io, and you can sign up for a free account. It's free to use the tool. We do have some paid stuff to it, which is monitoring of your hotspots. But if you just want to check out the status of your hotspot, you can look it up on that tool. It's an instant live check. So we have a miner in the cloud. It doesn't earn anything. It doesn't do anything. It just syncs along with a chain like your hotspot would. But we can query it. So we can say, hey, can you talk to this hotspot and ask it its information? So it goes away, asks it, and presents it on the screen. Now, at the current systems at the moment with Explorer or the app, those can take days to update, but this is a live check on the network. So this is going across the peer-to-peer network and asking your miner directly. I always say, like, the first choice is always look at the Bluetooth diagnostics report. That will give you some instant feedback from your hotspot. The next step is status, because status asks a miner to ask your miner its information. So other than that, anything from the API or Hotspot or the app, it will just be delayed by days. So often it's very frustrating to fix Relay, but look at the app and say, oh, nothing's updating. But if you go on Helium status, you can just go on there, type your hotspot name in, and it will tell you instantly.
Yeah, let's hammer that point home. So if you are trying to fix Relay on your hotspot, and you are using Helium, the Explorer or the app, you are very likely using outdated information that will confuse you and make it very, very difficult for you to figure out what is actually happening.
Yeah, so I always explain it in the sense that the API is a watcher of the chain. Nothing routes through the API. The API just sits on the sidelines and just watches what the chain does. So if my IP address updated on my hotspot, it might take 4 days before the API actually picks that information up, because it has to gossip amongst the peers and share that information out. So often, if you're just using Explorer, you might have already fixed a problem, but it's still saying it. So,
yep, and you'll see that on heliumstatus.io is you'll go in there and it'll say, here's what the Helium API is saying, which, if I'm understanding it right, is the same as what Helium Explorer is reporting, because Explorer is the API, is pulling from it. And then it'll say, here's what Helium status is saying. And so when I'm sending your site to people, I'm saying, just look at status. Like, don't even bother looking at the Helium API?
Sure, we've had some struggles with it. I mean, originally we showed people and put a warning message in and said, hey, look, your IP address is different. It wasn't to say that it's a bad thing and you won't earn, but it was often a sign that something had happened. So we didn't want to remove it completely, but you only need to care about what we call the observed listen address on status. The observed listen address is your live worked out IP address. Now, if status can dial you because status is a minor, that means that observed is right and working. But often you can click on the Helium API address and it will just fail. You know, it's old information, old gossiped information that's just not worthy. The only reason we leave it on there is so you can look at it and say, I might have had an issue here because my IP has changed.
Okay, cool, super cool. Let's see. Have I asked you what gossiped means, or what gossip means?
No, I mean, I can explain it a bit.
Please, yeah.
The way I understand it is that over the peer-to-peer network, you'll have peers. So your peers are other hotspots connected via the internet that you gossip blocks with. So if you're at height, then you say, what's the next block? You'll gossip with these peers and say, here's the next block. But the same thing happens for information as well. So every time your miner starts up, it'll say, this is me, I'm listening on this address, and announce it to these peers, and these peers share that information out. And eventually, along that chain, it will hit the API. And that's why it's so slow, because we've got 300,000 miners on the network now. You know, sometimes that information can get overruled by a bigger group seeing stale information. So it can be slow. Okay.
And this is more of a kind of big picture thought, but what you're basically doing is you're centralizing information with your miner, which is the opposite of what Helium generally does. But because of the situation that we're in this case, kind of the centralization of information is actually ultra useful to a lot of us.
It is really, really useful. I mean, often people have been checking things like Relay with a port checker, but we have a tool called Connection Tester, which is a lot more than that. A port checker just checks if the port's open. You know, it doesn't check if anything's working behind it, or, you know, with our connection tool, we're asking a miner to talk to your miner. So it connects and proves that the software's working. Yep. But the second part is you're actually connecting a peer on the network to you that's on a 10 gigabyte line. So it's much faster than it can be much faster in gossiping blocks or sharing information when you run a status check, because that information is shared out a lot faster.
And it's on a 10 gig line because it's a cloud miner and it's connected to something ultra fancy. Do you want to just walk me through with a screen share?
Sure.
Enhance. I think this is one of the kind of the core things in the network, is that really, to me, this is the intersection of normal people and high technology. And it's in the sense that most of us just plug in our router and our modem, and we're just like, yeah, the internet works, like, get me on Google. But if this is forcing people to say, like, okay, there are protocols that the internet basically uses for everything to talk to each other. And if I want to participate in this network and contribute to the network and earn from the network, I'm going to have to understand, at least at a high level, that those protocols exist, and that I've got to figure out how to make sure that they are working for me. So for me, it's kind of cool to see it forcing people to learn.
Yeah, so this is the status tool. You can just search for a name and it brings up a list of names. Okay. We could have taken you straight to the result, but I quite like this feel of seeing other peers. I think it's one of the things that you've got to realize. You're not alone on this network. You're not alone in your issues. Some people have them, and you can see it all over. For example, this one's obviously not talked to the hotspot in a while, but any information displayed on this page is from the API. So this is the API listen address. It's not what we've worked out. This is what the API is saying. So, for example, this one, I can look at it and say this is a relayed address on the API, or I can look at this one and say, oh, it's set up right. But that could be stale information still. So we do a live status report basically, and on the live status report, this is the live status, as in I could ping your hotspot, the hotspot talked to us, it did everything perfectly. You can see that the Helium API thinks it's online as well. I mean, it's obviously got a bad transmit scale, but we link through to Hotspot so they can go see the the reason for having that large transmit scale. You can see with peer count, this is how many peers you're gossiping blocks with. So this is internet connections. This is not witnesses. This is not people in your local area. This is internet connections to other hotspots that could be anywhere on the globe. And this is who you're syncing blocks with.
Is there a number that you want there? Like, oh, 18 is good and 12 is not that great and 6 is terrible? Or does it not matter?
Sure, there's sometimes a weird issue that I've seen where they'll drop peers and it'll be around the 4 or 5 number. And if it does get that low, then I would recommend to people that they reboot their hotspots. It will refresh the connections and it will announce and connect to new peers and it will likely go up. It's happened a few times. So I'd say if it's 5, 6, maybe reboot, but anything other than that is generally fine. And one of the other important tests is with this last connection. So this is the last time a connection was made to your miner over the internet. So if I refresh this page, you'll see that the last connection count drops. So you can be rest assured that your miner is actually responding and dealing with stuff, it's actually making connections like it should do. And the very final bit of information is the observed listen address and the API listen address. As we said, this API information could be old, and it's just a sign that if it was different, that something may have happened. One thing most people don't realize is their ISPs actually lease them an IP address for about 30 days. So every 30 days, your IP will change. So often when it's changing, you might have a couple of days of really bad downtime because the time it takes for that gossip to go through on the network. So we leave it in just so you can compare it and just say, oh, it's different. Maybe that was why. But you can go a step further as well and click the observed listen address. And this is a live ping test. So this is a live miner pinging your miner saying hello and it responding. This one's particularly bad at this time, and this is what I like to show. It says it's successful, but it shows you the latency. Now, when I look at the latency, if it jumps from a small number, like 150, one thing to note is this service is run from Ireland. So if you're in the States, it might be over 100, which is absolutely fine. But if I run it on an EU host, it might run in about 20 milliseconds. So if you're in the States, you might be able to take about 100 milliseconds off this time. But yeah, as you can see here, it went from 157 milliseconds to 1,810 milliseconds to 600 to 100. Now that tells me that connection is not stable. So it's very likely that could cause eventually going that high, that it might have times where the Wi-Fi drops out. So this might be on Wi-Fi, and that Wi-Fi is testing the limits of what it can do. So it's an important test that you look at the latency. And that's why we built the tool, basically, because as horrible as it sounds, and I know from experience, when I first had issues on the network, I blamed Helium. I blamed Helium for absolutely everything. And then every time I because I was lucky, because there was only a few of us in the community, I got to speak to an admin. They schooled me and showed me it was my network connection. So having these tools to look at your network connection, how well your hotspot is on the network, it will fix nearly all issues.
Cool. Let's ping that. So I'll talk about network connection speed and stability. Is most of us in Helium are kind of generally in the first world and don't really have a problem, but are there minimums that you look for with internet connection speed and stability as far as Wi-Fi versus Ethernet, or the speed of the connection?
Sure. I mean, one thing I've noticed, and it wasn't until I built this tool, because I was always doing this kind of stuff manually. I was manually going on a miner, running the book, having a look. I think I taught quite a few people how to do that, how to actually do it themselves and look up their systems. But it was only ever trivial information. I could, that period of time that I was actually checking, it was fine. But it wasn't until I went into this monitoring solution. So on Helium status, you can click add monitoring on a hotspot and see this yourself. I've obviously got a package because it's my site, but it costs for this to monitor. But the point is it checks your hotspots every hour. Every hour it monitors your hotspots, and that really brought it up to me that hotspots that I thought were absolutely fine aren't. You really want to put these on wire. You really do. You really want them Ethernet plugged in. As strong as you think your networking skills are with Wi-Fi, they're not. Wi-Fi is not that stable. It almost always solves problems when you wire them in. So, you know, there's options: power over Ethernet, power line adapters. I've seen people use Wi-Fi extender bridges and then wire them in. That can often be stronger, because the main issue people forget is that these hotspots are Raspberry Pis that big, and they have a little copper trace antenna on the board. You know, so it's just not going to be strong enough to keep signal. So that's the one thing I learned with the tool. You need to be wired in.
Yeah, no, there's basically two words that tell you what to do if you're thinking about doing Wi-Fi, and that's just stop it. Like, just don't use Wi-Fi. Use Ethernet cable. Figure out what it takes. I get a lot of questions, and you probably do as well, where it's like, oh, how do I get this Wi-Fi thing to work? It's like, don't. Like, take the time, figure out. Even if you have to drill a little 1/4-inch hole in your house, you have to like figure out how the whole thing works. Like, figure it out, because that will eliminate, I don't know what the percentage is, but a boatload of problems that will be caused by Wi-Fi connection.
And you'd be so surprised at even the best of networks. You thought how often they go down. I mean, that's what the monitoring shows, is that hotspots that I thought were absolutely fine were dying about 4 or 5 times a day still. And downtime just means that they're not going to be earning. So, and then obviously whilst they're offline, they're going to go behind and sync, and sync at the moment is real flaky, you know, in the sense that one little disturbance can cause you a few hours of downtime, you know, even if it's momentarily. So having the ultimate stability in network is so important for earnings. Yeah.
If you don't like money, use Wi-Fi. If you're in this to earn HNT, wire it in.
Sure. Exactly.
Cool. So I'm seeing 4 buttons on the bottom: the connection test, the ping test, wallet lookup, ad monitoring, and I'm seeing a couple new tabs on the top: the status, rewards, and peers. What do you got that's new?
Yeah, so the connection test, we actually do this when the report runs, but often people want to test their hotspots. So one common issue is that a miner at any one time will only keep about 20,000 miners in their peer book. So at any one time, they'll only ever have that many in there. And you know, there's these seed nodes that kind of talk between peers that hold it all together. So eventually everyone's covered, or they know a route to the right host. And so occasionally when you use this tool, it might say it's down. So it might say your hotspot's offline. And the best thing to do there is a connection test. Now, a connection test is like it says, it's just the IP4 address of the hotspot and the port it has open. But that's live connecting a miner to your miner. Yep, there you go. Hotspot connected successfully.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. And then, so if you go to it from the menu, so this pre-filled address in here is your public IP address that it's worked out. It's gone on the internet and said, what's your IP address? It's this, and then it's filled in the box. So if it can't dial you and you're on the same internet connection, you can use this tool to force connect to your miner. And once you do that and go back to the status report, it usually updates. So if it was offline before and the connection test worked, it will bring it back online and say that it can dial you and show you all the relevant information. Ping test is the same as what happens when you click on the listen address. It just runs a ping test on that hotspot to show you the latency of it. Wallet lookup, so you can look up how many hotspots they have on the wallet. Ad monitoring adds it to monitoring. We started looking at rewards. So people have mentioned to us that they want to alert some reports. So if their miner is you know, dropped quite a lot in how much it's made, they want to know reports on that. And we're happy to do status on reports on rewards, but we don't want to be hotspotty. We don't want to be vision. We don't want to do payments. We don't want to do planning. What we want to be is status of hotspots. So we don't mind showing information about this and allowing the users to do it, but this is the first step of that, basically. So showing how much they've earned in the last few days and how many witnesses they had, how many witnesses have seen them.
Yeah, just like the basic stuff. So you just don't have to jump over to explore. Okay, cool.
And the peer list is exactly that. It's who you're connected with over the internet to gossip blocks with. This hotspot's really well connected. It's got 19 peers right now. So some of them, there is one thing with it at the moment, some of them won't click through to other peers. So they're the seed nodes if that ever happens. Huh. But generally you can click on the hotspots and see the ones you're gossiping blocks with. So this hotspot right here in Canada is connected to one in New York to gossip blocks with over the internet. So it's a real global network. This is the peer-to-peer network of it.
Sure.
It's not really shown at the moment.
What's
It's going away, obviously, but
yeah, no, for sure. Because with the light hotspots, is there an advantage or a way to be a seed node? Can you talk me through what that is and what that does and why your node might or might not be?
Yeah. So in the miners config, it's got a DNS address. That DNS address resolves to about 18 seeds, I think it is. So when your miner starts up, it can connect to any one of those seeds. So it has like a known list of seed addresses that it can connect to and talk with blocks. So Helium run those. There's a number of them all over the globe, and it's what ties the network together. So at the moment, like I said, every hotspot only stores about 20,000 records, and that list is actually refreshed quite quickly. So, there's 320,000 hotspots on the network. So it's way more than what your miner can handle. So these seeds are what ties everything together.
Okay, cool. And Helium runs those, and that is going to happen for the foreseeable future. Maybe when we switch over to light hotspots, will the requirement for those will go away, or will we still?
Yeah, the requirement goes away as far as I'm aware.
Cool. Dig it. And then we haven't hit the most important button, which is at the bottom. Ask a pro. What happens when you hit that?
Yes, so we had a lot of feedback and feature requests of people asking about Relay, what's going on, and they just wanted some help. And I offer a lot of my time for free, but talking on the Discord, and I love talking about Helium, but sometimes people just want a solution to just talk to someone. So we offer little sessions with people that they can talk to us about anything, really. So
cool. Cool. So they just want relationship advice. They can call you up.
They just want some advice. They can have some. It's been requested so much. I mean, I put some more courses on my website if anyone wants to see it, 𝗵𝐺_nil.io. But that's more about devices and things and technically using the network. But sometimes people just have a question like, what antenna am I using, or why is it saying relay no matter what? Can I speak to someone about it? And they can use that button to speak to someone.
Dig it. And are you finding, has there been a problem that you can't solve? Is there something where you kind of put it in this box of like, well, that's kind of unsolvable right now? Or do you find that pretty much everything that you've ever seen so far, given a little bit of time, you can figure it out?
Generally, yeah. Generally, there hasn't been an issue. I mean, there's been some weird ones over the last year. SD card failures, kinks in wires or breaks in wires was one. But there's so many solutions that people don't realize that they can go out and actually try with their hotspot. Big one is, can you run data over your hotspot? Shows you instantly if something's wrong with it. But sometimes that's a bit much for people to work out. So they might want to speak to someone and say, what do I buy? How do I program it? And that's what we're trying to offer. Okay,
cool. And is there anything big picture that you guys recommend, just like getting a mapper, or is there something else?
100% recommend a mapper. I mean, it was so useful for me starting out. Everyone tells you to use LMR 400 cable, but have you ever tried 240? Have you walked around with a mapper and seen the difference? Is it worth it for short runs? No. I know that because I've tested. Or, how well does a huge plastic antenna work against some of these smaller ones that you get? Does antenna size make a difference when they're the same dBi? I know these answers, and that's from having a mapper.
Yeah. Are you a 𝐵𝐺 guy, or did you build all your own? Kind of where do you point people in general, or is this like proprietary information? I don't want to force it.
Yeah. So I've got a number
of a couple. Okay.
I've built ones. I've got Paul's LoRa field tester and the 𝐺𝐿. They're so useful, and you're also mapping the network for people. So it's improving the network. I always say to hosts, if you don't want to do anything else with your hotspots other than leave them in the corner, please buy a mapper, because it proves we have signal in the world everywhere. Yeah, and it helps developers when they look at the map and say, wow, look at that coverage. So it's like the best thing you can do.
Cool. Let's see. I'm going to pull off this screen here and go back to us. Would you hold those things up again? I think we did that with just like a shared screen, so they won't see exactly what it is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Wait, you want to see these?
Yeah. Just talk me through what you got there.
So that's 𝐷IS91's field test device. It's just a mapper. It's got the 𝐷IS_WEO terminal. I haven't got any battery on it. It's the 𝐷IS_WEO terminal and then a printed case on the back. But it's one of the best mappers that I found out there. It's a really interesting one because Paul's got a back end. So it submits the data to the back end and then the back end submits it to mappers. But that back end also tells the mapper how many hotspots heard it. So on the screen, not only do you get RSSI, signal to noise, but you also see how many hotspots heard you. So it's quite a nice, interesting feedback feature to have, you know, live when you're testing there somewhere.
And did you build that or you bought that? Or that's 𝐷IS91's info?
Yeah, 𝐷IS91's got it on his website, but Seed manufacture them now. So Seed sell them as a whole package that you can just buy. But if you wanted to DIY one, he sells the kit as well, I think. Okay,
and then you said, did you have a 𝐺LAMOS? I didn't see it.
Yeah, white 𝐺LAMOS.
Nice, super cool.
It's a very shiny one. I love it. It's brilliant for what it is, and it's definitely the most out of box, fresh, amazing experience. You know, it's the Apple of phones, you know, for mappers, the 𝐺LAMOS.
Although I'll caution you, if you're hearing that it's the Apple, like it's not totally super easy plug and play. Like there is some work to do.
No.
There's nothing.
It's an enterprise grade tool, definitely. It's not just a Dragino that you push one button and it's mapping. It's I want to be able to send at this frequency because that's what my sensor is going to send. Like I'm testing a placement, real enterprise level tool, but expensive.
Yeah.
Well, just to put it into perspective, I mean, like I bought these the WizBlock kit, and the WizBlock kits are so good at what they do. It's one of my favorite mappers, but in relation to the 𝐺LAMOS, that's more like 20 quid, 30 quid.
Right, and the 𝐺LAMOS are
a lot more DIY to it.
Yeah. Different things. All right, dude. Well, I'm pretty psyched with that. I think big takeaways are use helium status to check your hotspot. If your hotspot has problems, even check it if it doesn't have problems to make sure it doesn't have problems. If you need help, reach out to Neil, and then get a mapper and do a little bit of mapping. I mean, just for 20 pounds, whatever that is, I don't know, $27 or whatever it is, like it's cheap enough and you'll learn so much about the network by just trying to interact with it. I'll tell you straight up, it will be frustrating if you're not a techie, but you can do it. You can figure it out. If you have problems with it, get on Discord. You can ping, don't ping me because I won't be able to help you very much, but hit Neil. There's a whole community on Discord that's super helpful.
Always around on there if people want to talk. And that's the great thing about the community. You know, if you have trouble with the mappers, go to mappers, and so many people will help you. So yeah, no, it's been an amazingly generous community. Been super kind of inspirational to be a part of. It's just like, man, I should maybe be a better human like these people. So, cool. Anything else before we wrap up? No, I think that's everything. Cool. Fucking hey, dude. Cheers, man. Honestly, thank you so much.